You noticed it too, didn't you? Everything's happening at the same time, and not just in the world, but inside you. There's a shaking, a restlessness, like your soul is hearing something that your mind can't explain. Nations rising against nations, headlines that blur between prophecy and panic, Israel in flames, Iran in fury, and somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, your heart is beating faster, but not from fear, from something deeper. A question that won't go away. Why now? You try to go about your day. You check your phone, maybe say a prayer, maybe not. You flip through the news, and somewhere between the stories of bombings, collapsed buildings, and trembling borders, you feel it, like something is being whispered beneath the surface, as if heaven is shouting through a storm. But the world has trained you to hear only the rain. That tension you're feeling isn't just anxiety. It's spiritual, it's ancient, it's timed. People keep saying, everything's out of control. But what if it's not? What if there's a design in the destruction? What if what's happening now was foretold with terrifying precision? 2,000 years ago, a man stood on the Mount of Olives and looked over the city of Jerusalem. His voice didn't shake, but his words did. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see that you are not alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Matthew 24:6-7. And then he added something most people forget. All these are the beginning of birth pain. He wasn't talking to politicians. He was talking to followers, to people like you. People who would one day scroll through news feeds filled with blood and missiles and think it was just another day. But he warned them, this is how it starts. And the problem isn't just that it's happening. The problem is that most people are sleeping right through it. Wars have always existed, you might say. Yes, but never like this. Never layered like this. Never aligned like this. Never with the spiritual tone this moment carries. Because this isn't just about nations and borders. This is about awakening. There are wars that move tanks, and there are wars that move time. This is the second kind. Think about it. How can a single piece of land the size of New Jersey shake the world every decade? How can one nation, surrounded by enemies and outnumbered in weapons, still stand after thousands of years? Israel isn't just a country. It's a timeline, a covenant, a spiritual clock that ticks when the rest of the world forgets to look at the hour. And when Israel is in war, it's never just about politics, it's about prophecy. This is why what's happening now matters. Because every time Israel is touched by conflict, something stirs in the heavens. But this time, the stir isn't distant, it's coming for you. You feel disconnected from the war, maybe. You're not there. You're not holding a weapon. You didn't choose this, but maybe it chose you. Maybe the reason you can't sleep lately, why your prayers feel heavier, why your chest tightens when you see a headline, is because this moment wasn't just designed for the nations, it was designed for you. And while the world watches the bombs, God is watching your heart. See? The mistake most people make is thinking that prophecy is about predicting events, but prophecy is about awakening alignment. God doesn't shout just to be heard. He shakes to be felt. And if you've been numb spiritually, disconnected, going through the motions, this is the moment where he starts knocking harder. That ache in your spirit, that low burn behind your ribs when you hear of rockets flying and cities trembling, that's not just emotion, that's memory. The soul remembering a promise, a purpose, a warning. Because when Jesus said these would be the beginning of birth pain, he wasn't just speaking about the earth. He was speaking about you, the one he called, you, the one he anointed, you, the one who buried your gifts because life got heavy. You, who started doubting when prayers went unanswered. You, who stopped fasting, stopped fighting, stopped feeling. This war isn't random. It's a trumpet, not just in Israel, but in your house, your mind, your faith. We are not in a season of comfort. We are in a season of confrontation, not between nations, but between God and the spirit of sleep, between the alert and the anesthetized. And right now, Millions are spiritually asleep with their eyes open, going to church, quoting verses, posting, praying for peace, but never asking what this moment is trying to wake inside them. What if this war is not meant to scare you, but to summon you? There's a line in Matthew 24 that few people notice. Right after Jesus talks about wars, earthquakes, and betrayal, he says this, "But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." He doesn't say the one who understands will be saved. He says the one who endured. Why? Because some things you don't survive by intellect. You survive by fire, by grit, by faith that burns even when hope flickers. And if your faith has been flickering, if your lamp is running low, this is your refill moment. God is letting the world shake so that your soul stops settling. Do you remember when you used to believe more? When you used to feel fire in your prayers? When you used to cry during worship and not hide it? When you used to expect miracles instead of fearing bad news? Where did that person go? Buried under what? Disappointments? Delays? Dead religion? Because right now, heaven isn't just fighting over territory, it's fighting to bring you back to life. What's happening outside is only a mirror of what's happening inside. Nations are rising, but so are questions. Fires are burning, but so is hunger. And you can't keep ignoring it. The world isn't going to slow down for you to catch up. The trumpet doesn't wait for someone to open their eyes. This is why you're watching this. This is why the timing is so specific. Because something eternal is moving, and it's moving now. And maybe, just maybe, the reason everything is happening at once is because God is trying to reach what you've been ignoring the longest. And the scary part? If this war can wake you, it can also leave you behind. There's something unsettling about silence in the middle of chaos, like the pause before the storm, or the breath before the scream. You're seeing the world shake. Explosion, siren, prophecies fulfilled in the background of your scrolling. But deep inside, something is still. Not in peace, but in paralysis. You know something's off, but you don't know how to name it. You're awake, but not alive. Surrounded by noise, but spiritually deaf. And that's the most dangerous kind of silence. Because when the trumpet sounds in the heavens and your soul no longer responds, you've already fallen asleep with your eyes open. This war, this collision between Israel and Iran, is not just a global disruption. It's a spiritual defibrillator, but you only feel its jolt if you haven't already flatlined. Romans 13:11 doesn't whisper. It shouts across time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. Paul wrote that 2,000 years ago. If it was urgent then, what does that make now? You were not designed to live in numbness. You were not meant to drift through prophecy like a tourist on a moving train, watching through the window as eternity rushes by. But that's what happens when the spirit fades and the flesh gets loud. You stop discerning, you stop burning, you stop responding. The trumpet becomes background noise. The signs become just another statistic. Have you ever tried to wake someone from a deep sleep? You don't start with a whisper. You shake them. You pull the covers off. You turn the light on. You get louder. Why? Because sleep resists reality. And spiritual sleep is even worse. It fights truth. It justifies compromise. It turns conviction into discomfort, and discomfort into apathy. And here we are, watching one of the most prophetically charged regions on earth ignite in flames. Jerusalem, the spiritual epicenter of both history and destiny. Iran, a nation whose leaders vow to erase Israel from existence, now marching closer to nuclear ambition. It's not just tension, it's the reactivation of ancient hostilities. And if you listen closely, you'll hear echoes of a pattern. This isn't the first time God used conflict to wake his people. In the days of Gideon, Israel had grown complacent, comfortable, silent, until their enemies surrounded them, and God raised a man hiding in fear to become a warrior. In the days of Elijah, the prophets of Baal danced in power while Israel forgot its covenant, until fire came down and reminded them of who their God was. And in the New Testament, it was persecution that scattered the early church, not comfort. It was pain that turned believers into evangelists. And maybe that's what this moment is too. Not punishment, but provocation. Not wrath, but revival by fire. But you won't recognize it if you're still asleep. You see, people don't fall asleep spiritually overnight. It happens subtly, slowly. A skipped prayer here, a heart closed during worship there, a sermon you scroll past, a moment you felt conviction, but chose convenience. And before you know it, you're singing songs without feeling them, reading verses without trembling, walking through a life that looks holy but is hollow. This war didn't come to entertain your curiosity. It came to confront your condition. Think about this. In 1 Thessalonians 5:3, Paul says, "While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape." He's not describing a far-off scene. He's describing now. Because what's the phrase plastered across every political treaty, every ceasefire negotiation, every international summit? Peace and security. It's everywhere. It sounds noble, but when that phrase becomes the anthem of the world, Scripture warns us, judgment is next. It won't be slow. It won't be polite. It will be sudden, like contractions before birth. Sudden, violent, necessary. And what's being born? That's the question no one wants to ask. Because if God is allowing the earth to shake, it means something divine is trying to enter, and you can't birth the next season with the sleep of the last one. So ask yourself, what has this season killed in you? What have you surrendered, not because God took it, but because you stopped fighting for it? Was it your fire, your discernment, your prayer life, your boldness, your calling? Because war doesn't just expose nations, it exposes hearts. What you run to in chaos reveals who your God really is. And if you're running to distraction, denial, or delay, you're already behind. But if something in you still aches when you hear His name, still stirs when you see His word, still trembles when the Spirit whispers, then you're not lost. You're just asleep, and the trumpet is blowing for you. You can't afford to hit snooze anymore. Not when prophecy is no longer distant. Not when headlines sound like the red letters of Scripture. Not when the same land God swore to Abraham is being bombed, and the same people He scattered are returning. You're not just living in interesting times. You're living in strategic ones, divine ones, and the enemy knows it. That's why he's not attacking your morality first. He's attacking your alertness. Because if he can't make you evil, he'll make you unaware. And unaware believers are powerless ones. They don't intercede. They don't discern. They don't resist. They scroll. They sleep. They survive. But you weren't called to survive prophecy. You were called to stand in it. This moment is sacred, not because of the war, but because of what the war is waking. The Spirit is moving, not just over nations, but inside rooms, inside hearts. And He's not looking for experts. He's looking for the available, the alert, the ones who still say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening," even if they don't understand, even if they're afraid, even if they've been numb for years. Because the Spirit of God doesn't need your perfection. He just needs your permission. And right now, He's calling out of the shaking, out of the chaos, out of the war, not to scare you, but to separate you, to set you apart, to raise you up. Because what's coming next isn't for the comfortable, it's for the consecrated. And the real question is no longer, why is this happening now? The real question is, are you finally awake? You've been watching prophecy unfold like it's someone else's story. Headlines blazing, sirens wailing, nations unraveling, and yet your soul still numb. Not because you don't believe, but because something in you got buried, deep beneath routine, buried under disappointment, buried under that quiet lie that says, this isn't about you, but what if it is? What if God allowed this precise moment in history not just to awaken nations, but to awaken you, to peel back the curtain between what you see and what you were born for? Because you're not just witnessing prophetic events, you're inside them. And whether you realize it or not, the war outside is a mirror of the war inside. The silence you feel isn't peace. It's the stillness of a heart that hasn't felt the presence of God in too long. You go to church maybe. You hear sermons, you nod, you agree, but the flame, the trembling, the urgency, it's faded. And the scariest part is, you've learned how to function without it. That's what the enemy counts on. Not that you'll deny God outright, but that you'll get so good at pretending to be awake, you won't notice when you've slipped into a coma. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 24:12 that in the last days, the love of many will grow cold, not explode, not disappear, just grow cold, like embers that once burned, now reduced to a soft, flickering glow. And if you're honest, that might be you. You don't hate God, you're just tired, and nothing around you is helping. The world is on fire. The church feels confused. Your prayers echo back empty. And the signs? You're not sure what they mean anymore. But God is not confused. He's precise. He's been orchestrating this timeline with eternal detail. That's why Matthew 24:6-8 doesn't describe chaos. It describes contractions, labor pains. And the thing about contractions is, they get closer together and more painful. You can't stop them. You can only prepare for what's coming out of them. You prepare by waking up. In 1 Thessalonians 5:5-6, Paul doesn't suggest wakefulness. He commands it. You are all children of the light. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. The Greek word for sober here means clear-minded, alert, able to discern, not just politically or emotionally, but spiritually. You see things others don't. You feel things they ignore, but you can't walk in that calling if you're still sleepwalking through sermon. This war between Israel and Iran is not simply the latest headline, it's a prophetic alarm. Because the spirit behind this war is not new. It's ancient. It's the same hostility that's burned since Genesis, since the Tower of Babel, since Haman plotted against the Jews in Esther's time, since Herod tried to kill Jesus. It's the same spirit that whispers, erase them, destroy their name. And yet God says in Jeremiah 31:36, only if these decrees vanish from my sight will Israel ever cease being a nation before me. It's God's signature, His eternal promise, sealed in cosmic ink. And if He's that faithful to a nation, what does that mean about His faithfulness to you? You see, the enemy doesn't just hate Israel. He hates anything that proves God is still writing the story. That's why your life has been attacked so strategically. Because if you ever fully wake up, if you ever realize that the Holy Spirit still burns in you, that your calling didn't die, that your past didn't disqualify you, and that your voice still has the power to shake darkness, you become dangerous again. And that's what He fears most. Think about the last time you felt truly alive in the Spirit, when prayer wasn't a task, but a lifeline, when Scripture didn't just speak to you, but through you, when worship broke, you opened and rebuilt you in the same breath. What happened to that version of you? Where did you lose them? Was it disappointment? Was it sin? Was it waiting for something that never came? Or did you just get tired of staying awake when everyone else was dreaming? Spiritual sleep is contagious. When the culture around you is spiritually dull, staying sharp feels like resistance. When believers normalize compromise, purity looks like pride. But you weren't called to blend in. You were called to burn. And the fire in you isn't gone. It's buried, smothered under months or years of spiritual noise. But God isn't done digging it out. That's why this moment matters. Because for all the pain, all the uncertainty, all the apocalyptic fear on your screen, there's also an invitation to return, to burn again, to feel again, not emotionally, spiritually, to hear the trumpet of war and let it wake you, not terrify you. You don't need another confirmation. You don't need another prophecy. You need oxygen to hit the flame again. And sometimes, war is the only thing that shakes the ash off long enough to let the fire breathe. This is not just the end of an age. It's the beginning of a separation between those who can still hear the shepherd's voice and those who've tuned him out, between the alert and the asleep, between those who scroll past prophecy and those who live inside it. And you were born for this. Not to fear the times, but to interpret them, to weep, yes, to intercede, absolutely, but also to rise, to speak, to warn, to watch, because the Spirit of God is still whispering, still blowing like wind across dry bones. The only question is, will you breathe it in? And will it be enough to bring you back to life? There's something terrifying about being numb, because when you're numb, you don't even flinch when the earth shakes. You hear about nations rising against nations, rumors of war, famines, earthquakes, and all you do is scroll. But somewhere inside you, something still twitches. Something still knows. This isn't just politics. This isn't just history. This is a countdown, and you were never supposed to sleep through it. The Bible doesn't exaggerate when it says the end times will come with deception so thick that even the elect would be fooled if possible. That's not hyperbole. That's a warning. And one of the greatest weapons of that deception is spiritual sedation. Make people feel just safe enough to stop watching. Make the alarms feel like background noise. Make prophecy feel cliché, until the church stops watching for Christ and starts watching the stock market. And in the midst of that blindness, war breaks out, not just between armies, but between realities. The physical world is screaming, but the spiritual world is roaring. Because every bullet fired in the Middle East echoes a spiritual message to the world. God keeps his word, and Satan knows it. Think about this. Why is Israel always at the center? Why does one sliver of land ignite so much fury? Why are empires and ideologies obsessed with its erasure? Because Israel is not just a country, it's a covenant. It is the living evidence that God speaks, and when he speaks, he fulfills. And if he can keep a 4,000-year-old promise to a rebellious people, what does that say about his promise to you? But the war isn't just about land. It's about the throne over that land. And every soul watching from afar is also being tested. Will you interpret the signs or ignore them? Will you awaken or drift? Because Jesus didn't say, when you see these things, panic. He said, lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. And yet, most people don't lift their heads. They bow them, not in prayer, in distraction, in entertainment, in exhaustion. And slowly, the trumpet becomes a hum. The prophecy becomes a meme. The urgency becomes a mood. And that's exactly how people will be caught. Just as Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, eating, drinking, marrying, planning, unaware that the flood is already rising beneath their feet. But let's get honest. Part of the reason we stay asleep is because we don't want to wake up into a reality we can't control. It's easier to pretend it's not happening, that the darkness isn't growing, that the lines aren't being drawn. But the truth is, they are. And you have to choose where you stand, not just politically, but spiritually. Because this war in the physical is shaking something ancient in the spirit. It's not just armies positioning, it's the hearts of men being positioned. And God is using this hour to separate wheat from chaff, not through sermons, but through seasons, through the shaking, through the disruption. And if you don't let it wake you, it will expose you. You may feel like your life is disconnected from all of this. You're not in Israel. You're not in Iran. You're not in the headlines. You're just trying to survive your week. But in heaven's eyes, you are on the front line of a war for awareness. Because every time you ignore a warning in your spirit, every time you brush off the voice of conviction, you are choosing sleep. And spiritual sleep always looks like safety until it turns into silence. The silence of not hearing God anymore. The silence of being surrounded by noise but unable to feel the present. The silence that convinces you God forgot you, when in truth, he was speaking the whole time. You just stopped recognizing the frequency. And maybe that's why this war is shaking you. Not because you fear bomb, but because something inside you knows. The shaking outside is proof that what God spoke is real. It's always been real. The enemy didn't waste decades trying to distract you for nothing. He was trying to keep you from this moment, this realization, this collision between your sleep and your destiny. Because some awakenings only come through the fire. The early church didn't grow because things got easier. It grew because persecution clarified what comfort had blurred. And maybe that's what's happening to you. God isn't trying to scare you. He's trying to wake you. Before the final trumpet sounds, before the flood closes, before the doors of the ark are shut. And maybe this is your trumpet, this video, this war, this discomfort, this holy discontent that won't let you go back to normal. Because normal is what almost killed you, what numbed your gifts, what silenced your calling. And the Spirit of God is calling you to come out of fear, out of numbness, out of compromise, and into clarity. You're not here by accident. You're watching this because heaven needed your eyes to open again, not just to see what's happening, but to remember who you are inside of it. You carry prophecy in your bones. You carry fire in your breath. And the world needs it now more than ever. Because the hour is late, the lines are drawn, and the trumpet is still sounding. There's a terrifying thing happening in silence right now. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of decision. That quiet space between conviction and action. The moment where your soul knows it needs to move, but your body stays still. And while the war in Israel and Iran screams through every headline, what's louder in heaven is the war happening inside of you. The trembling decision of whether you will finally respond to the call or keep pretending you didn't hear it. Because the truth is, many heard the trumpet, many felt the shaking, but few are willing to leave the comfort of the shadows to step into the light of obedience. It's not that they're evil, it's that they're tired, numb, suspicious of hope. They've been let down before, and the enemy has been very strategic in using that pain to make them think God was the one who walked away. But he didn't walk away. He waited, patiently, silently, firmly, because real love doesn't force itself. It waits to be wanted. And now, in the middle of political chaos, in the middle of global fear, in the middle of shaking economies and broken systems, his voice is returning. Not in thunder, not in fire, but in that still, small whisper that says, I never stopped choosing you. This is the hour of personal awakening. The headlines are just the surface. The deeper move is happening in your heart. And the greatest tragedy of this generation won't be that it lived during wars. It will be that it slept through its own spiritual resurrection, that it mistook comfort for safety, that it exchanged purpose for productivity, that it heard prophecy and shrugged. But you don't have to be one of them. You don't have to ignore the sound that's been trying to pull you out of numbness. Because the war between Israel and Iran isn't just geopolitical, it's prophetic. It is thunder from heaven saying, time is not unlimited. And just like Jesus warned, these things are not the end, but the beginning of birth pains. That means something is about to be born. And birth always begins with groaning, with pressure, with a breaking of water, and with blood. It's violent, messy, and sacred. And what's being birthed now is a generation that doesn't sleep through shaking, but stands in it. And the only way you become part of that generation is by saying yes. Not a loud yes, not a perfect yes, but a real yes. A yes that wakes up early and listens again. A yes that deletes the distraction. A yes that dares to open the Bible like it actually carries the breath of God. A yes that lets go of every excuse that says, I'm not ready. Because ready is a myth when God is the one calling. The enemy will tell you you're not qualified, that your past disqualifies you, that your doubt makes you weak, that your lack of passion means you don't belong. But he says that because he knows what you'll look like when you finally wake up. He remembers the last time you prayed from a place of desperation. He remembers what happened when you worshipped in your pain. He remembers that when you burn, others catch fire. And he's terrified you might realize it again. Because you are not small. You are not forgotten. You are not a background character in someone else's story. You are a warrior whose weapons have been buried under apathy. And this war, this shaking, is not the enemy's plan to destroy you. It's heaven's alarm to resurrect you. And if you can feel even a flicker inside you while hearing this, then it's proof your spirit is still alive. The fire is not gone, it's just hidden under ashes. And God never let fire die without a plan to reignite it. Do you think it's coincidence you're alive in this hour? Do you think you were meant to just watch these prophecies unfold like a movie? No, you were born for this time. Your prayers matter. Your voice matters. Your obedience, no matter how messy or weak, shakes things in the spirit that you cannot see. And while the world panics about missiles and tanks, heaven is leaning over the balcony, watching for one thing. Will you rise? Because when you rise, the chains break. When you rise, the fear flees. When you rise, demons remember your name. When you rise, angels are dispatched. When you rise, family trees are rewritten. And you don't need a stage, or a title, or a platform. You just need one moment of yes in the middle of the war. One moment of, God, I'm tired, but I trust you. Wait, that is how revivals begin. Not in crowds, but in caves. Not with microphones, but with whispers. Not with influence, but with surrender. And here you are, at the edge of the cave, hearing the trumpet, but still blinking through the fog. And I'll tell you what no one else wants to say. There won't be another alarm. This war might be your last warning. Not because God is cruel, but because He's close. And when He's close, the time for delay is over. This is holy ground now. This is decision ground. And you've seen too much to pretend you didn't. So whatever has numbed you, drop it. Whatever convinced you to give up, expose it. Whatever you lost that made you stop dreaming, grieve it. Then stand up again. Because while Iran and Israel exchange missiles, heaven is calling warriors. Not political ones, prophetic ones. Those who can still feel. Those who can still hear. And the story is not over. Those who still believe that God speaks, still fulfills, and still fights for His people, including you. The world may never understand why Israel cannot be erased, but you do, because deep down, you know the same God who preserved that nation through exile, genocide, betrayal, and occupation is the same God who preserved you through depression, heartbreak, addiction, silence, and fear. And just like He won't let Israel fall, He will not let you be erased either. You still belong in the story.